Hi, I'm Jennifer Woosley Sailor. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor and the kid of a cop. And this is the podcast When the Call Hits Home.
Hey everyone, it's Ashlee Gethner. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I'm also a child of a police officer.
Hi, welcome back to the pod. I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Ashlee. And if you are playing the little drinking game of every time we say we have a special guest, you lose out today because it's just us.
Oh, I wanted you to say that we have the most special guest today, which is just you and I.
You know what? You're right. You are.
I know.
But I think we're excited to just come on and talk because we've had some really incredible things happen. We've had some really incredible guests. And,
Mhm.
it's always good for us to come back to just each other to really touch
Yeah.
base, touch home with everybody and talk about some things that we're seeing happening.
I'm just having a flashback to our first recording when I was a nervous wreck and it was just you and I and like I think I wrote an entire script out to like
We
us
did.
just
No,
feeling
we
like
did.
we did.
We
We
really
did.
did. I still have
Uh
it.
oh, do you? Well,
Yeah.
I'll go into our library one day. But yeah, so I think sometimes it's nice just to have you and I, though we love our guests, to just talk about different things. And I know one of the things that we have mentioned, like in other podcasts, and just like moving forward and the whole family dynamics. And I guess it's just been on my mind a little bit too with eggs being really expensive and it's just talking about like the financial stress that can happen within a family and then what does that look like in the family of a first responder when it's a high stress job. So yeah, I kind of want to talk a little bit about that today. And
I'll put a little caveat in there that you've had to
yes.
change your resiliency class because of these egg prices. So people need to get on that. We had a class going, okay? And eggs
That is
ruined it.
hilarious that you bring that up. So, for people who have not had to sit through my resiliency class,
So good.
which actually came because of COVID. So I do this like, I mean, people probably hate it. I'm the speaker that's like, you're not gonna get to just sit on your phone and not pay attention to me. I'm going to make you do things. So I get lots of eye rolls when I give my presentation. But with COVID, people couldn't be close building something together. So I got creative and we did an egg launch. And I think people really enjoyed smacking eggs against the concrete. But then that turned into like, I can't afford to do that anymore. And
What
people were
the
like,
heck?
I miss the eggs. I miss the eggs. And I'm like, well, you're gonna have to go buy the eggs. I
I was
can't,
just about to, so
that
at
can't come
some
out of
point,
Woosley counseling. Like
we're
that
about
just
to
could,
have a chicken coop, like resiliency chicken coop, fresh eggs, because
it would be hot,
only way we're doing it.
hot off the nest. Like,
Sorry, I'm just derailing us today, but
no,
you're
that's
not
hilarious.
wrong.
I
The
love it.
financial aspect, right? We're roping it back in, and that financial aspect really is taking a hit on everybody right now.
Yeah, it is. And it's a stressful thing. And I think this comes up and is why this is an issue for me is sorry, mom and dad, but y'all thought about money a lot. Like that was a huge stressor, I think, in my experience growing up is just the stress of money. And I mean, my parents definitely gave me coins to pay for my lunch at times, like,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
because things were tight and things were hard. And that's back in the day when we had a decent economy. Like it's even harder when things are tough. And so I just understand the impact that that has. And I think that that's a big impact for a lot of families sometimes is just the financial stress.
Yeah. And I know we've kind of hit on this a little bit before in different episodes, but I think it's really important to talk about like the family aspect, the family dynamic, so we can talk about it as children of first responders and what that was like for us. Because I do think there's a little bit of a misconception of like, I remember people being like, oh, well, your dad's a police officer, like you guys are fine, like financially.
Hmm.
And well, that was far from the truth. Unfortunately, I cannot bring any positivity to this either. So the way I grew up was not good. And I know I've shared that before in terms of finances and my parents fighting about it as well. So I think like money just brings me massive anxiety
Yeah.
to this day. Like, to this day. It's saying, oh, that's my worst thing too. Like, okay, so people said that about my dad, but even now, right? I get this all the time. Well, you're the doctor of social work, people. Have you looked up the salary? Because it isn't what you think, right? Like,
Right.
but yet money really is something that impacts us. And I know, Jennifer, we were talking about our childhoods and how they were kind of similar in that way of just being stressed out about money. And I think a lot of our first responders fall under this umbrella of getting caught in a cycle that I
Mm,
can work a lot and make money, but
right.
then life is happening and I have
Yeah.
to afford it all too. So it doesn't actually ever catch up.
I think that's a hard one too. And I think like I've seen that a lot in terms of this job, sitting in this chair as a therapist and hearing situations where there's first responders who are picking up tons of shift, who are working multiple jobs. I even think about some firefighters who are firefighters and then part-time contractors. They're doing home repairs for people, all in this aspects
Yeah.
of, having
Oh
more
my.
money, which is, I think again, this like, well, let me think outside the box. Let me figure out how to provide. And then unfortunately, seeing in a few situations where that kind of blows up in its way because maybe the family's like, well, you're never home. Like, we never see you. And well, I'm working so I can provide so you guys can go do the things. And that recognition of like, but we want to do those things with you.
Yeah.
That's great that you send us to Disney, but we want you at Disney with us. And that can be extremely hard as well.
And I'm gonna say something that's maybe a little like challenging, right, for people to hear, but I'm just honest on this show. I'm honest in person. It's who I am, right? Like, while there's this aspect of, well, I'm working to provide, and that's fair. I do see that a lot. I also see a lot of my first responders having struggles within their home life. And so it's easier to say, let me go pick up all this overtime because I'm making money and avoid the conflicts at home sometimes too than to just be, home with the family. And I think like I would love any listener listening to this be insightful on that because while you are doing that, and sure you are providing, and it's a great excuse, right? Hey, I'm bringing home the money. We need the money. Everybody needs more money, right? Like you are missing out on all that time with your family then too, right?
Yeah.
Especially your kids.
Well, and I appreciate, that there is some situations where that is really true. If I'm a broken record, I don't know if I've shared this or not here, but I mean, I can remember having my son and being on maternity leave. And, he was this wonderful thing that we were so happy to have. And I looked forward to going back to work. And I was like, what's this about? And, you know, in some reflection and meeting with my own therapist and talking about like, well, I'm much more confident as a therapist than I am as a mom.
Mm,
And I think that that can be
what a great
really
point.
true sometimes. And again, like I'm happy to be a mom. I don't just, put them in a closet and work all the time by
Which
any
does
means.
not.
But it's also this kind of idea that sometimes you're exactly right, like that there is some comfort in, well, I know the job. Maybe the job is black and white. Maybe the job is where someplace I can get some feedback. And, people don't have to know every aspect of me. Like our family knows every aspect of us. And
Yeah.
sometimes love to remind us that we're human and things. And so I appreciate you bringing that point up, Ashley, that sometimes it's, well, it's about providing for my family when really it's about escaping some of
Well,
that
and
stuff.
that word, right? I
Hmm.
actually hear that very, very often in my office. I hear like verbatim all the time, work is my escape.
Hmm.
Escape from what? Right?
Right.
Like that should be the opposite. Uh,
Hmm.
and that's a heavy word for me a little bit too. Like clinician
Yeah.
wise, like escape, like it's a big
Yeah.
word. We're not, but and yet my first responders say it quite often,
Yeah.
and I do think that finances are a really big theme that I see when I have first responder couples or families in my office. And again, it is this escape of saying, I am giving more money to this family by doing this,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
yet we're still avoiding kind of the main conflicts then by
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah. Exactly. And when I think too of seeing ourselves as whole, like again, when I talk about becoming a mom, I wasn't a mom. Was a daughter and a friend and a wife, and then there's this new role that I take on, and having to see ourselves in all of those positions instead of just what I do. And I think that's a theme of the podcast, is that we talk about this over identification with the job, and what does that do impacting our families? I think I'll reflect again to our first episode and talking about like, oh, I'm the kid of a first responder, a kid of a cop. But really in my reflection of like, well, he really was my dad first.
Yeah,
And
that's
this was something that was othered. And I don't know, that sometimes though that line can be blurred. And I think that I've had experiences as a kid that that line can be blurred.
absolutely. When I present, because I have this like opportunity that's been incredible. It's not easy for me to do actually. I go present at different departments now about what it was like for me to be a child of a first responder, and I give all my credit to my dad for allowing me to be so open about things and to do that, right?
Mhm.
And yet when people ask me, so I present on other topics as well, and I always say in my presentations, like, I would rather present on the other topics than what it was like for me to be a child of a first responder because I'm standing up there completely vulnerable, giving it my
Mhm.
all, right?
Right.
And it is bizarre to me sometimes. Like, I think that just hit me and now I'm processing out loud. Just that notion of like, yeah, I guess I never stopped to think like he should have been he is my dad first, right? And
Hmm.
yet when I like even do that presentation and stuff, like it's all about him being a police officer before, you know, and then being my dad.
Hmm.
And so that is actually a very interesting take because I don't know. Do you think it's easy for somebody to get that mixed up though too, right? Like the priority, wouldn't it just be a priority at that point? The priority of being an officer and my career
Hmm.
versus my family?
Right.
But societally, we put so much, I don't even know if that was a word, but we put so much emphasis on our careers and making something
It
for
is. If we
ourselves.
go to a social event, one of the first questions if you meet a stranger is, what do you do? I mean, I definitely think that that is a huge part of our identity.
Yeah. We're not
Yeah.
walking up to someone being like, are you a mom?
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
Like, are you a
sometimes
dad?
they do that too. I mean, somebody asked me yesterday if my child was in college, and I was like, well, no, but I guess, do
Stop
you think I'm
it.
older?
Okay, first off, let's take a break in the action.
Right. No, no, no,
Social
no.
norms 101. Don't say that
Er,
to anybody. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Come on now.
But no, I mean, I definitely think that there's things like that to consider. We're definitely taking this down a path, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah, and more of like an open, vulnerable one though, right? Because like I
Yeah.
was like, uh-oh, that just smacked me in the face when you said that. Well, and it did because of that. Like, and again, I just stress when I give my presentations like this one, I actually don't love to give compared to my other ones because it's factual information. This is
Yeah.
like my life and being vulnerable, right? And there are moments when
Hmm.
in my presentation I say things and all of a sudden it hits me again, right? Or I think of something new and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, and I think that for me, like the financial aspect, I really think that that drove my dad's motivation in life, but like also just so much negative came from that, but not in a bad
Hmm.
way, right? Like he didn't mean it bad. He was just
Hmm.
trying to provide and do what he had to do. I
Right.
think of when my parents were divorced and I was living with my dad, and like I did not, I was younger, I mean 18, 19, I think, maybe a little younger too. And then like, well, I don't know. I don't remember even when I went to school. But anyway, I was like home alone like all the
Hmm.
time. You can ask my
Hmm.
friends. We loved the house. It turned into a party. Sorry, Dad. It is what it is. Like, because nobody was there.
Right. I
Like
mean, when the cat's
nobody
away,
was
the
like, we
mice
have
will
so many great
play.
memories, everybody. Don't go looking in my past. But he wasn't there, but he was working. And I struggle sometimes. I don't take it personally necessarily because I knew he had to work to feed me, right? Like to
Right,
keep the roof
right.
over my house and stuff. But then I do think about all these times that like, I'm not kidding, it would be days, sometimes days, because my stepmom lived out in the area that he worked, and we
Yeah.
lived like 45 minutes away from his job. So like if he
Hmm.
worked a double, he would stay at her house to get up to go back because he worked at Am's, right? So like it
Right.
didn't make sense. So sometimes I was alone for a few days, partying, living it up. But really in grand scheme, like that all could have been time he could have had with me or, us as his kids and stuff, but he had to make that sacrifice to just make it work,
Yeah.
right? I'm mumbling. I don't know, but
No, no. I mean, I think I'm following you at all. And I think it's this whole thing of like, it's interesting what making money will cost you sometimes, when you are working those overtime jobs and things like that. And again, with good reason. And those aren't bad things. It's just all about looking about where is a little bit of the balance. And, balance doesn't look like 50-50 equal. Balance is sometimes I have to put extra energy into this right now, whereas, this will have to kind of wait and exploring that. And I'll say for me, again, there was just a lot of conflict around finances. And I think, Ashley, you say this a lot in the podcast. I think it's really true, just about communication and communication being so important in like navigating those things. And to overshare, I think my husband will be okay with this, but I think that just again had me avoid, avoid, avoid because finance equal fights, and I don't want to fight. And so let's just not talk about money, and then we won't fight about money. And again, that just didn't work. And it's just like, well, if we communicate and just seeing those opportunities, maybe in the family I grew up of like, oh, there might have been some more opportunities for us just to have some open conversations around things. That would probably help in things being a little less stressful about money.
so defensiveness comes to mind when I hear you say that. For me, like growing up, like that, I feel like because finances give me a lot of anxiety and I've seen such negative sides of it, like if I'm questioned by my husband about finances, I get defensive right away. Right.
Oh,
And it's not even
same.
about that, right? Like
Right.
he's not trying to be mean to me. He is trying to have a conversation with me, but I get so defensive and like fearful. I'm just gonna put it out there. I'm just doing it.
Hmm.
I get
Hmm.
fearful that I'm gonna turn out to be what I saw in terms
Yeah.
of finances, and
Hmm.
I like I can't have that, right? Like so I
Hmm.
go overboard in my life to try to make sure that that doesn't happen, but and I'm calling myself out like in those moments, I do struggle really bad to have anything like to have communication on it even though I know it's the best thing because I feel like when I'm approached with it I have to be defensive about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and same. And I feel like, any conversation was about budget was, I'm being sent to the principal's office and,
Mm-hmm.
let's judge all the things. What
Yeah.
is it? It's so expensive to look this cheap. I think that's a Dolly Parton quote. Those kind of things that you like that you're going to be held to task for. But I will say, I think something that helped me is, I listened to tons of podcasts and somehow stumble on, because trust me, y'all, I was not seeking out any financial podcasts. The algorithm got me, and it just had me kind of reflect on those experiences, that I had as a kid, and that, I think some of the research says by age 7, we have beliefs in finances. And listen, let me speak a little bit here in terms of like, I had a roof over my head. I had food in my stomach. Like, we were not by any means without, as some
Right.
people. I mean, some people's experiences were homelessness or hunger or things like that. And what does that set you up for when you think about money?
Right.
It's that scarcity or what poverty's impact has about your beliefs. I went off a tangent there, just again, because I want to acknowledge.
Well, and I think you don't realize though. So you spit that fact out to us a few episodes ago. And what I want to say to that is that I'm so thankful that you did because I literally had someone come back and say it to me verbatim from like listening to us. And what I love about when that happens is that I know in those moments that our listeners are taking a second to think, right? And to reflect. And I think that's the whole point of us coming on with this little more brief podcast episode because we are going to lead into having someone on here to talk about finances, right?
Because we're
But
not experts.
no, disclaimer. But like I definitely what I would love for any first responder and or their family listening to this, right, is to reflect on that individually and bring it back to your partner.
Exactly. Just think about yours. Just think about
Yeah.
your experience. Yeah,
Where
for
did it come
sure.
from? How did it come from? Don't be that first responder who just searches out all that overtime to not be home and make those
Mhm.
memories, but also, right, like use it to your advantage if you do need it. Like there's so many different
Mhm.
ways. And so the only way to actually file through that is to stop and think about it and to be
Yep.
reflective on it.
Yep. I agree with that completely. And yeah, we just wanted to hop on and kind of talk about some of those things and their impact because of those. I definitely feel like I led the charge on this one, Ashley, in terms of like, hey, I want to talk about this, but I appreciate, as always, you just being so brave and so open.
You have to be, right? Like I think like
Yeah.
the best part about our podcast to me is this world of like I can dive into me and give you what I got, even though it's uncomfortable. But I can also dive into my clinical side because there's no
Yes.
lie that relationships is probably my number one concern with all of my first responders right now. And
Hmm.
guess what? Finances fall right under that,
Don't they?
right?
Yeah.
Like that's
Hmm.
such a big theme that continuously see. And so the whole point of this podcast, no, it's not all the time are we going to have record-breaking episode where you're getting all this brand new information that's changing your life. But I will tell you that I will talk about finances 600 times over until somebody gets it. And if they
Right.
get it and they change it and do whatever, woof, I'm happy,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And again, Ashley and I are not experts when it comes to that, but obviously we want to get you guys in touch. And so that's some of our work too, and having this conversation is trying to, is hear your guys' feedback and say, is this something we want to talk more about and have experts on?
And there might be a kid out there listening who's a child of a first responder going through the same thing, right? We are
Mhm.
both children of police officers. We both experienced our parents going through divorce,
Yeah,
right? And unfortunately, we both had to experience that financial aspect of it due to that. Your
right.
children don't just get out of that. I say that in my
Exactly.
presentations all the time. We see, hear everything that's going on in the home. And
Hmm.
and in this first responder world, what do we know? We know that divorce rates are super high, and we know that financial problems are super high.
Right.
And so we have to talk about it, even though it's very uncomfortable.
It is, and I think it goes back to that like communicate, 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 and we have to, communicate if that's what we want for our listeners. So that's why we're on here just kind of sharing about those things.
Yeah.
But thank you guys.
But more in the exciting round of it is that
Yeah.
we're not just gonna kind of leave you hanging. We are kind of leaving you hanging, but we're not because one of the biggest things that Jennifer and I always talk about is like these themes that we see with our first responders, right? But then we also seek out some very amazing people to help us convey messages and give us some tips or tools or what have you, whatever you want to say. And so obviously we're leading into some things here and just want to leave you reflecting before we give you the meat of the
Yes,
financial
yes, yes,
discussion.
yes. Yeah. So stay
I wonder what
tuned.
our listeners think of me. Like, this girl is on it. She's on it.
You know that is none of your business.
Like, look, I
But
sometimes can bring the hot sauce.
you should
Sorry.
be concerned what I think of you, and I think you're the best and
Oh
wonderful.
my God.
So,
I think the same. I'm like, I need your calmness. I'm always going
Mm.
off. But we are super thankful for all of our listeners.
Always, yes.
We shared some great news earlier. I shared some great news off air that our listening has gone up drastically, and we're just
Yeah.
humbled and honored. Oh,
Yes.
so thank you
Thank you.
everybody for doing that and sticking with us.
Yeah, you guys have a good one.
Absolutely. Don't forget that when the call hits home, Jennifer and I are here for you.